Hello, and welcome back to Tea's Christmas Villages. This is the third video in a row now that I've made this week, showing you how I am making these, what they are called dungeon tiles, out of a 1/2 inch thick foam, rigid foam. I quickly went through the procedure in the last two videos and explained a little bit about why I was doing what I was doing, but I did not show you a lot of the details of how these are made. So realistic. I've rethought some of my painting techniques, and I've done a little bit more research, and I realized when I'm not doing quite right, so I wanted to explain that to you as well. But we're going to begin with how I texture the dungeon tiles. Now, in a previous video I explained to you that my grandson has a 3D printer and he's been making me a number of items, and one of them is this roller. And this roller comes with an imprinted pattern, and it's meant for cobblestone. It's meant for rolling it out on styrofoam base and making cobblestone walkways with it. But there are other uses that you can have for this, and this is really a nice way of adding texture to the slabs on the dungeon tiles. So I'm going to show you how this is done. So as you can see, I've scored the dungeon tiles. This is not a completely square one. They're a little bit off, but that doesn't matter much. So I'm going to take this roller and I'm going to press it down onto the styrofoam and show you what the effect of this is. And as you can see, it makes it look a little bit more like stone and less like styrofoam. I will also do the edges, because some of the edges, of course, will be visible, even though a lot of them will be clipping together with the magnet. When I get the magnets, they're not in yet. And it really leaves a nice texture on there. Now, other craft makers will add things like cracks on their tiles, which you can also do. Or even with a little, they will take little bits of pieces out, because the stone is not going to be completely smooth. Or even little marks like that. So in the end, you get a slab that looks quite realistic. The other thing that the crafters have taught me is that you can make these individual squares, you can round them off by cutting the edges off of them. Now you need to be careful with this. Don't get too carried away and cut too much out, because then it'll look very odd. But if you take a little bit of the edges out, the sharp corners, and you also can trim the edges, the sharp edges, with an X-Acto knife or a box cutter, that really adds to. But the amount of tiles that I need to make, I'm not going to spend the time doing all these little fine crafty things to the stone. But I will take my box cutter and trim the edges, because that does tend to make it look like less like styrofoam and more like concrete slabs. And I'll do that before I carry the lines forward to the side. I've already textured the side, and I will take the lines forward to the side, but I will trim it first before I do that. This is all in an effort to make these look less like styrofoam, bits of styrofoam, and more like concrete, realistic concrete slabs. Fiddly work, but take your time. Just showing you a few details that I neglected to show you in the earlier videos. I think I got that one. This is pre-painting. So now I'm going to carry these lines through to the sides, because there will be some areas where the sides will be visible and you want to make them look realistic. So I'll first slice a little bit with my carving tool. And then I will use a pencil to mark them. Now the painting that I did in the last video, I did rather quickly. And although I need to make many of these tiles over the course of the summer, I do want to spend a little bit of extra time painting. So I will do first a black base altogether so that the black gets into all the cracks and all the little indentations. Then I will color several of the bricks different colors. I'll do a beige and a brown, as well as a gray, maybe a light gray and a dark gray. And then I will cover it again with the black wash this time, with black mixed with water, so that it's just a wash. And then comes the trick. I have usually just taken my fan brush. See if I can find it here. I don't seem to have it here. Oh, it's probably being soaked in water. My fan brush, and I fan it over with a white dry brush. They call dry brush when you take most of the paint off the brush and then run it over. But I'm not going to do it that way this time. I'm going to take a much smaller brush and use a darker gray, because I feel like if I need to add snow, I can add snow. I don't need to do that with the painting. And that will make a difference with how they come out. I'll show you one of the ones I did yesterday. This is the one I did yesterday. Now you can see the different colors of bricks, which is good. But I find that the dry brushing with the white has kind of spoiled it a little bit. I'm not quite satisfied with that. So I'm going to try a darker gray and a smaller brush and take a little bit more time over it. And make sure that the brush is very dry, that there's very little paint in it. And hopefully that will make a difference. So that's how we get from here to here. As well, I want to show you the difference between this and this. This is how the original dungeon tile looks when it comes freshly cut from the styrofoam. And this is the effect that we want. A more of a weathered, concrete looking type of slab. Now, yesterday I also did not explain very much about how I made the stone wall. I like the stone wall. Once again, I'm not crazy about the dry brushing, the white dry brushing, so I think I'm going to change that technique a little bit. But I neglected to tell you how I got this stone wall to look like this. So I had simply cut the appropriate size pieces out of the styrofoam, and I did the same thing. I ran the roller over top. I'm not going to do it now because I've already done it. And also on the top and the sides. But I did not, and I ended up with this wall that looks like this, but I did not curve the edges. I didn't fine tune it, and I think you can tell. It just looks like a block. While it slightly resembles a stone wall, it doesn't really resemble the stone wall the way I want it to. I did this one on both sides. And this one is unpainted and just scored. So I'm going to do a little bit of carving and take the sharp edges off. once again, to try and make it look more natural and less like a piece of styrofoam. I had thought at one time that I'd have all of these 3D printed, but I find I'm quite enjoying making these walls. And once again, I'm going to be embedding the magnets in the side and then they'll clip together. I will also try to make some curved walls so that they will go around corners. But that's a project for the future. It's amazing what a little bit of carving, what a difference it makes. Don't be afraid to work on this. You can't make mistakes. Now this is a little bit more rounded, whereas this one is very sharply. This one looks a little bit better. I did not do the back of this one because of the black stripe that comes on the styrofoam when you buy it. But this one can be used either side. Now, I could still score this one and carve it up a little bit, but then I'd have to repaint it. So I'm not going to do that. I'll just mark it up to experience and know how to do it in the future. The other thing that I wanted to mention was that I took a box that had cereal in it, and I cut strips of it, and I will be gluing those strips to the bottom of the stone wall, just to give it a little bit more stability, so that when it sits, it's not affected as much by the varying elevations in the diorama. It gives it a little bit more stability. And I'll just use a hot glue gun for that.